At the company banquet, I was the only one left out. The sense of isolation and humiliation pressed down on me so hard that I made a decisive choice to leave. I turned off my phone, cut off all contact, and curled up to sleep, sinking into a deep, heavy slumber. It wasn't until the next morning that I realized my phone had almost been called into oblivion by my boss. More than 100 missed calls, each one saturated with panic and fear. Only then did I understand. What I had been avoiding might have been a massive storm crashing down. Morning sunlight slipped through the gap in the curtains, slicing across the floor in a blinding beam. I opened my eyes, my head throbbing as if I'd just come out of a brutal hangover. I hadn't touched a single drop of alcohol the night before, yet the feeling of being excluded, discarded, and insulted was more intoxicating than any liquor. I reached for the phone on my bedside table and pressed the power button. The moment the screen lit up, notification sounds exploded all at once. The phone vibrated violently in my hand, nearly slipping from my grasp. 107 missed calls. Every single one from the same name, President Tran. My heart clenched, as if squeezed by an invisible hand. I scrolled with fingers gone cold. Beyond the missed calls, there were dozens of unread WeChat messages. In the company group chat, my name had been tagged again and again. The red notification numbers glared like mocking eyes. At Lam Khê, where are you? Lam Khê, reply now, this is serious. Does anyone know how to reach Lam Khê? What's wrong with her? At a critical moment like this, she disappears? It's over. It's really over. This time TU track is done for. Each vague sentence was soaked in confusion and panic. Images from last night surged back like a broken dam. Project lead Lee Na had stood by my desk, impeccably made up, her tone laced with feigned guilt. Oh, Lam Khê, I'm so sorry. My brain really works like a goldfish, she said, patting her forehead dramatically, an exaggerated performance worthy of a third-rate actress. The dinner with Director True was a last-minute group decision. I completely forgot to tell you. You don't blame me, right? I lifted my gaze over the thin rims of my glasses and looked at her quietly. Behind her, several co-workers avoided my eyes, yet the corners of their mouths twitched, unable to suppress their smiles. Those meaningful glances stabbed into my skin like tiny needles. I said nothing, I simply nodded. After work, I didn't go home. As if possessed, I walked to the restaurant where they were gathering. Separated by a single street, I could see the lavish building clearly. I could imagine the private dining room, the clinking glasses, the laughter, the animated conversation. And me? The core technical lead of the project, standing alone in the shadows like a discarded object. What I felt wasn't anger. It was a bone-deep coldness. A humiliation that seeped into my marrow. I turned and left. On the way home, I decisively turned off my phone. I didn't want to receive any hollow apologies disguised as concern. I didn't want to see a single messy, half-baked explanation. Let them forget me completely. Now, staring at President Tran's name on the screen, a strange sense of retaliation rose from the depths of my chest. Let them taste my absence. Let them understand that some gears cannot be discarded at will. I took a deep breath, suppressing my emotions, letting the chill spread from my fingertips through my body. And then I called President Tran back. The phone was answered almost instantly. Lam Khê, President Tran's hoarse voice came through the receiver, tangled with sobs and trembling left over from panic. You finally picked up. Thank God, you finally picked up. His words tumbled out chaotically, soaked in fear. Do you know what happened? Something big, huge, has gone wrong. Everything's collapsing. I didn't respond, I just listened. He hurriedly recounted what had happened at the dinner the night before, repeatedly mentioning several key phrases. Director True, the contract, the data, all wrong, a leak. My mind snapped into motion, rapidly assembling the scattered fragments. Lam Khê, why didn't you come last night? He demanded urgently. accusation slipping into his tone. Why weren't you there? I walked toward the window, watching the traffic flow below, my voice icy and flat. No one told me. The line went dead silent. The pause stretched for more than 10 seconds. Then President Tran spoke again, this time filled with guilt and desperation. Lam Khê, please, don't talk about that now. I'm begging you, come back to the company immediately. Right now. His voice was almost pleading. I'll explain everything. I'll give you a fair explanation. Come back. The company needs you. I hung up without giving him any promise. A strange unease rose in my chest, but beneath it was a colder anticipation. I wanted to see just how massive the storm caused by my absence could become. I stepped in front of the mirror, quickly washed my face, and changed into a clean, professional outfit. The woman reflected in the mirror had sharp, clear, unwavering eyes. She was no longer the weak girl swallowed by humiliation in last night's darkness. Today, I was going back, either to clean up the wreckage, or simply to watch a good show. The moment I entered the company lobby, an oppressive silence slammed into me. The receptionist saw me, opened her mouth as if to say something, then forced a smile that looked worse than crying. The entire office floor was unnaturally quiet, nothing like the usual morning bustle. Small groups of co-workers whispered together, faces pale. When they saw me, all eyes turned toward me at once, expressions tangled with fear, avoidance, schadenfreude, and, strangely enough, jealousy. I ignored them and walked straight to my desk. As I passed the project team's area, the people who had laughed so cheerfully at last night's banquet now looked like wilted eggplants. Heads bowed, not even daring to look at me. President Tran's office door was ajar. Inside, suppressed but fierce arguments leaked out. What's the point of saying this now? Responsibility. Who's taking responsibility for this? Director True has already given the order. The legal notice will arrive today. Where's Lam Khê? Has anyone found her? This report was done by her. Hearing my name was like being dragged onto a pyre. At that moment, the door flew open. Lee Na rushed out, hair disheveled, makeup smeared. She froze when she saw me. A flash of venomous resentment shot through her eyes, like a snake lying in wait. But it vanished quickly, replaced by an awkward, ingratiating smile. Lam Khê, you're finally here, she said hurriedly. Everyone's been waiting. Her voice trembled. It was hard to tell whether she was acting or truly afraid. President Tran is looking for you. Go in quickly. She reached for my hand, pretending familiarity, but her icy, stiff fingers betrayed her. I calmly pulled my hand back and walked straight to the half-open door. As I pushed it open, the stench of cigarette smoke hit me, making me frown. President Tran was slumped in his chair. In just one night, he looked 10 years older, sunken eyes, bloodshot and hollow. On the sofa sat two others, Director Liu from Legal and Director Wang, the technical lead. All three looked tense. The ashtray on the table was overflowing with cigarette butts. When they saw me, President Tran sprang up as if he'd spotted a lifeline. Lam Khê, you're here? His voice was hoarse. I nodded slightly, my gaze sweeping over the scattered documents on the desk. President, I heard something happened. He waved for me to sit, while pacing back and forth like a trapped animal. It's not just something, the sky is falling. He stopped and stared straight at me, each word slamming down with crushing weight. Last night, at the contract signing dinner with Director True, right before the signatures, their side conducted a final review of the critical data report we submitted. The results of the report revealed catastrophic errors. Core data figures were severely distorted, completely misaligned with the previous presentation, and there were even several fatal-level mistakes. Director True exploded on the spot, accusing us of commercial fraud, and immediately stormed out with his entire team. Director Liu from the legal department adjusted her glasses and added, the cooperation contract with Director True includes an extremely strict clause regarding data accuracy. If we violate it, not only will we have to pay triple the advance, 90 million, but more seriously, he can blacklist us across the entire industry. If that happens, the company is very likely to go bankrupt. 90 million. Bankruptcy. Those two words fell into the air like sledgehammers. Director Wong cleared his throat lightly. His gaze cut toward me like a blade. His reproach undisguised. Lam Khê, the final data report was compiled and submitted by you. Now that such a major error has occurred, this responsibility. He didn't finish the sentence. But everyone understood the implication. I was the one meant to take the fall. Now I finally understood why my coworkers' looks that morning had been so complicated. In their eyes, I was the disaster bringer, the sinner who had pushed the entire company to the brink. But I didn't rush to defend myself. My heart didn't ripple at all. I simply looked at them quietly, as if watching an absurd tragedy unfold. Director Wong, I said calmly, you're right. The core data analysis section of the report was indeed done by me. I paused briefly, then shifted my gaze to President Tran, whose face had gone pale with rage. But every version of the report I submitted is saved in my email. The final version was sent to team lead Lee Na on Friday afternoon before we got off work. For final review. In the email, I clearly stated that she should confirm the accuracy of the data before forwarding it to you. In addition, my personal computer still contains the complete original dataset and an encrypted backup copy of the report, complete with timestamps down to the second. My voice wasn't loud, but in the deathly silent room, each word landed with the clarity of a hammer striking steel. Director Wang's expression changed. He flicked a glance toward the door. President Tran's eyes sharpened instantly. He spun around and barked toward the doorway. Lee Na, get in here, now. Lee Na entered hesitantly, her face white as paper. President Tran, he asked, suppressing an eruption of fury. Is what Lam Khê said correct? Was the report checked and forwarded by you? Lee Na trembled, her eyes darting wildly. That day, I was too busy. The project was urgent. I don't think I had time to review it carefully. Didn't have time to review it carefully? President Tran's voice shot up. A project worth 90 million. And you're telling me you didn't review it carefully? I noticed Director Wang's eyes flash with suspicion mixed with contempt when he heard her excuse, brief but unmistakable. After his outburst, President Tran fell into heavy contemplation. He wasn't stupid. He had begun to realize that this wasn't a simple accidental mistake. A cold smile rose in my chest. The anger of being framed, I had prepared for it long ago. Now, looking at Lee Na's flustered, panicked state, I found it laughable. The real show had only just begun. Lam Khê, President Tran shouted, tearing through the suffocating air in the room. Go verify this immediately. He pointed straight at my desk, his finger trembling with rage. Take the flawed report and compare it word by word with the original you submitted. Check every single character. I nodded, said nothing more, and turned to leave the room. Lee Na collapsed at the doorway like a heap of mud, glaring at me with eyes that seemed to spit venom, resentment so thick it was almost tangible. I ignored her and walked straight back to my workstation. As soon as the computer booted up, the familiar interface appeared. I quickly located the final report I had sent to Lee Na, stored on my encrypted drive. Timestamped precisely to the second. Then I asked Director Wong to retrieve the version of the report that had been sent to Director True the night before from the company server. The two documents were placed side by side on the screen. I took a deep breath and began comparing them line by line. Director Wong and several technical staff stood directly behind me. The entire office seemed to hold its breath. At first glance, the two versions were identical, from layout and charts to the narrative descriptions. But my instincts told me the problem would be hidden where no one expected it. I typed rapidly, drilling down into the underlying data layers of both reports. I found it, I said quietly. My finger pointed at two dense strings of data on the screen. Look here, this is the core profit prediction model of the project. Some parameters were altered. I highlighted the modified values in red. This parameter was reduced by 0.5%. This one was increased by 0.8%. And here, the risk evaluation coefficient was replaced with an outdated model from 3 years ago. These changes are extremely subtle. If you only look at the charts or the final conclusions, it's nearly impossible to detect. But these tiny adjustments completely reversed the report's conclusion, from strongly recommended for investment to high risk. Observe cautiously. I looked up, my voice turning cold. And what's more alarming is that this method of modification is highly professional. It not only bypassed the system's default checks, but also erased most operational traces. To pull this off, the person would need very high-level system access and exceptionally strong technical expertise. As soon as I finished speaking, a wave of sharp, shocked inhalations sounded behind me. The blade had found its direction. This wasn't an external threat. It was internal. More precisely, a person with authority, system access, and insider status. President Tran's face darkened like the bottom of a storm cloud. He stared coldly at Li Na and Director Wang standing to one side. Which one of you is going to explain this to me? Not me, Li Na screamed as if her tail had been stepped on. I don't understand this technical stuff at all. How could I possibly modify it? Director Wang also hurried to deny it. President Tran, it definitely wasn't me. Yes, I have access, but I have no reason to do something like this. That would be career suicide. Both of them denied it vehemently. The room fell into a tense silence. I quietly observed the entire scene, my mind racing. Li Na had deliberately excluded me from the meeting. She clearly resented my abilities and feared I'd take her position. She had motive. But did she have the capability, or was someone backing her? I spoke up, presenting a bold hypothesis. President Tran, there's another possibility. He frowned. Another possibility? Yes, I met his gaze steadily. What if this report wasn't altered by mistake, but intentionally? Intentionally? His brows knit tighter. The goal would be to present Director True with a deeply flawed report right before contract signing, provoking him into anger and destroying the partnership. President Tran pressed immediately. Who benefits from that? My eyes slowly settled on Li Na. If, hypothetically, if someone wanted to sabotage the company while also pushing all the blame onto an absent person, permanently crushing them, what then? Li Na's eyes flickered wildly. Panic flooded her face. Her lips moved as if to argue, but no words came out. She quickly tried to redirect the conversation. What's the point of saying all this now? What matters is how we explain this to Director True. At that moment, Director Wang, who had been silent, suddenly let out a startled sound. All eyes turned to him. He frowned, struggling to recall something. I remember now. Last night at the banquet, Li Na received a phone call and made an excuse to go to the restroom. She was gone for a long time. When she came back, her expression was strange, extremely tense, and she kept staring at her phone. His words were like a stone thrown into still water, sending violent ripples across the surface. My own memories surged back instantly. During the final days of the project, Li Na had repeatedly hovered around my desk, deliberately asking about progress and key figures in the report. Once, she even used the excuse of refilling my water and lingered in front of my computer screen for nearly a full minute. At the time, I thought it was just concern from a team lead. But now, looking back, every glance and every gesture had been calculated. President Tran wasn't a fool. He quickly pieced together all the fragments. His gaze turned terrifyingly cold, locking onto Li Na. Seal all information, he barked, his voice low and decisive like a battle command. From this moment on, no one is allowed to leak a single word outside. Director Wang, Lam Qi, you two will review the entire system access log from last night. Especially during the time of the banquet. I want to know exactly who stabbed us in the back. A chill ran straight up my spine. This was no longer simple office jealousy or routine internal sabotage. This was a meticulously calculated scheme, one capable of bringing the entire company down. And my absence, something they had planned to turn into evidence of guilt, had instead become my only alibi. I suddenly realized it. I was the key to unraveling this entire incident. And I was also the greatest variable, the one thing they had never been able to control. President Tran locked Director Wong and me inside the company's server room. This place was the neural center of the entire system. Cold air hissed relentlessly from the air conditioning vents. Rows of server racks blinked with lights, like enormous steel beasts slumbering in silence. Director Wang's expression was grim. As he pulled system logs, he muttered under his breath, "Impossible, how could anyone bypass both the firewall and the audit system?" I didn't answer. I took control of a terminal with the highest level access permissions. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Lines of code flooded the screen like a raging torrent. The standard access logs had been wiped clean, but the manipulator had clearly underestimated me. Instead of chasing surface logs, I dove straight into the lowest protocol layer of the data packets, tracing every file modification and network transmission. Minute by minute passed. The server room echoed only with the sharp clatter of keystrokes and the deep hum of cooling fans. Director Wong found nothing. Sweat soaked his forehead. But on my screen, an invisible web was slowly taking shape. Here, I looked up and pointed at an abnormal data line on the monitor. At 8:15 p.m. last night, exactly when the banquet was underway, an internal account used a remote control protocol to log into the server that stores the documents. Director Wong leaned in, his eyes widening in shock. "It's Li Na's account." "Yes," I nodded and continued tracing the trail. She logged in to do only one thing: replace the final report file in the project directory. The entire operation took less than 30 seconds. After that, she logged out immediately and erased all surface-level traces. That damn woman. Director Wong slammed his fist onto the desk in rage. "Not yet." I grabbed his wrist, signaling him to keep watching. "The real part comes next." I rewound the data stream further back. 5 minutes before the file swap, at 8:10 p.m., Li Na's account established a short encrypted connection with a foreign IP address. I highlighted the IP in red. Through this connection, she uploaded a file. Using my access privileges, I extracted and decrypted the uploaded data packet. When the file name appeared on screen, Director Wang's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. Sky Horizon Project, Core Architecture and Source Code version 3.0. That was the company's flagship technical project, over $100 million invested. 3 years of R&D. And still unreleased. If sabotaging the report was meant to destroy the deal with Director True, then leaking the source code was a killing blow, one powerful enough to drag the entire company into the abyss. Director Wong and I looked at each other. The same icy dread crept up both our spines. Clutching the irrefutable evidence, we rushed straight to President Tran's office. After reviewing the full chain of evidence I presented, his entire body trembled. In fury, he hurled his teacup to the floor, shattering it. "Call Li Na in here. Now." When she was summoned again, Li Na's face was white as a sheet. "Li Na," President Tran said, his voice cold as ice. "I'll give you one last chance. Do you confess, or do I slam this evidence into your face?" She staggered, nearly collapsing, yet still stubbornly resisted. "President Tran, I don't understand what you're talking about. I'm being framed. It's Lam Ki. She fabricated this evidence to set me up." She suddenly pointed at me, screaming herself hoarse. "She's jealous because I'm the team lead. She's always wanted my position. Now that something happened, she's scared of being blamed. So she's dragging me down with her." It was laughable. Even at this point, she was still trying to bite back. I didn't argue. I simply turned my laptop screen toward her. Displayed clearly, her account login history, the foreign IP address, and the file name containing the leaked core source code. Li Na, I looked her straight in the eyes, my voice calm and steady. The encryption protocol you used to transmit that file was developed by me for the internal system 6 months ago. The decryption key is known by only 3 people in the company, me, Director Wang, and President Tran. So tell me, why would someone like you, a team lead who can't even read parameter values properly, be able to use that exact protocol to connect to a foreign server? Don't you find that strange? Li Na stared at the evidence on the screen. Her face drained of all color. She collapsed onto the floor, eyes vacant, lips trembling. No, it wasn't me. I didn't do it. President Tran's fury reached its breaking point. He picked up the phone and dialed an internal line. Security. Detain Li Na immediately. She is not to leave the building. Not one step. No contact with any communication devices. Legal department, call the police. Now. President Tran, don't, please, you can't do this to me. Li Na finally broke down, wailing as she clutched his leg. President Tran kicked her away without hesitation, disgust filling his eyes. The moment you betrayed this company, you stopped being an employee here. Security dragged Li Na away. The entire office sank into a deathly silence. But the danger wasn't over. At that moment, President Tran's secretary burst in, pale and trembling. President, Director True's company has just sent an official legal notice. A white envelope was placed on the desk, like a death sentence. Compensation, $90 million. Along with a declaration reserving the right to pursue full legal liability and reputational damages. The company truly stood on the edge of the cliff. Director Wang and Director Liu from legal both looked ashen. Despair saturated the room. It's over, someone whispered. It's all over. President Tran slumped into his chair. I looked at them, took a deep breath, and said calmly, President Tran, now is not the time to give up. All eyes turned to me. Li Na was only the executor. There is definitely someone else behind her. What we need to do now isn't to assign blame, it's to reverse the situation. Reverse it? President Tran laughed bitterly. Director True sees us as frauds. Cancelled the contract, and sent a legal notice. Tell me, what exactly do we have left to turn this around? With a new report. I met his gaze, every word sharp and decisive. A report strong enough to change Director True's mind. Strong enough to show him our real value. I will do it myself. And I will personally present it to him. My voice carried undeniable confidence. Director True was a pure businessman, extremely risk-averse, but exquisitely sensitive to massive upside. Even the original unaltered report had only been average. But this time, what I intended to give him wasn't a report. It was a vision of the future. A commercial roadmap he wouldn't be able to refuse. I need time, full access to all data, and unconditional cooperation from every department. President Tran stared at me. Slowly, a spark of light ignited in his clouded eyes. At the bottom of despair, he had grasped a lifeline. He slammed his hand on the desk. Fine, Lam Ki, from this moment on, you are the principal lead of the entire project. All company resources are at your disposal. Use whatever you need. I only want one result, at any cost. Bring Director True back. I nodded slightly. I knew that from this moment forward, I was no longer the one cast aside. I now held the fate of the entire company in my hands. This counterattack, I would command it personally. I moved into an unused conference room and turned it into my temporary command center. President Tran granted me the highest level access. Every database in the company was fully unlocked. I sealed myself inside, cutting off all outside distractions. By then, the company was buzzing. The news of Li Na being taken away by the police exploded internally like a bomb. Some were stunned, some were skeptical. But more than anything, all eyes were on me. Colleagues who had once isolated and ignored me now looked at me with fear and caution. Some even avoided me entirely, as if I carried a contagious virus of power. Those who had once been close to Li Na quickly changed their tune. Bringing water and tea, flattering incessantly. Sister Qi, honestly, I always thought something was off about Li Na. Lam Qi, you're incredible, a modern-day Zhuge Liang. For people who shifted with the wind, I responded with cold indifference, sometimes without even looking at them. I wasn't here to perform palace intrigue in an office drama. My battlefield was the computer screen. I began extracting 5 years of project data, industry reports, and all publicly available information related to Director True and his investment ecosystem. I even leveraged personal connections and private data resources I had accumulated over the years to dig into deeper layers no one else had touched. For days and nights, I barely slept. The conference room filled with cold lunchboxes and empty coffee cups. My mind functioned like a supercomputer, processing massive datasets and constructing evaluation models. President Tran stopped by several times a day. He didn't dare interrupt, he simply stood outside the glass wall. Eyes torn between anxiety and hope. I knew exactly how heavy the pressure on my shoulders was. I wasn't just writing a report. I was racing against death. During the data analysis, I discovered something even more terrifying. The report Li Na had altered wasn't merely designed to lower projected profits. Within the outdated risk model she had embedded, there was a meticulously engineered financial trap. This trap led to the conclusion that a new energy project, one currently held by Director True, faced severe policy risk and should be dumped as soon as possible. But according to my most up-to-date analysis, that project was precisely the real ignition point for explosive growth in the coming years. If Director True had truly believed that falsified report and sold off the shares he held, an anonymous investor would have been waiting in the shadows to scoop them up at a bargain price, reaping enormous profits without lifting a finger. I froze. The force behind Li Na wasn't just targeting our company. Their ambitions ran far deeper. They had used the pretense of cooperation with us as a launchpad, weaponizing a forged report to construct a large-scale financial trap. One strike to cripple Director True. One stroke to destroy our company, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Borrowing someone else's knife to commit murder. A chill crept up my spine. This game was far darker and more dangerous than I had imagined. I made a decision. My new report couldn't merely correct the data and present the project's true potential. It had to quietly warn Director True about the trap he had nearly fallen into. I needed him to see that I wasn't just someone who could make him money, but someone who had just saved him from a fatal deception. After 3 days and 3 nights without sleep, a report capable of overturning the entire situation was finally born from my hands. Over 100 pages, no longer confined to a single project. I placed everything within the context of the entire industry, macroeconomic policy, market trends, and even Director True's personal investment behavior. I not only corrected every flaw in the original analysis, but also proposed a completely new ecosystem-based collaboration model, one that would fuse our company's technology with Director True's investment network into a closed-loop business ecosystem where both sides would win. The projected commercial value was more than 10 times higher than the original cooperation plan. For the risk assessment section, I was particularly meticulous. I designed a stress testing module using the latest data models, simulating a wide range of black swan scenarios, unexpected events that could impact the investment portfolio. In one simulation, I used charts and hard numbers to demonstrate exactly how catastrophic the consequences would be if someone made decisions based on an outdated model and dumped shares of that new energy project. I never named anyone outright, but I was certain that with Director True's sharp instincts, he would understand the message hidden between the numbers. I printed the final version and handed it to Tom Tran. His hands trembled as he accepted the stack of documents. He spent nearly 2 hours reading it, page by page, from beginning to end. When he finally looked up, His eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. He stared at me as if I were some unfamiliar life form from another planet. Lam Khê, did you really do all of this by yourself? I nodded slightly. This is no longer just a report, he said quietly, his voice heavy with respect. This is a strategic blueprint capable of reshaping an entire industry. He took a deep breath, his gaze regaining its former steel. I'll go with you personally. We're meeting Director True, now. Director True's office was located on the top floor of a landmark skyscraper in the heart of the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a vast, glittering urban sprawl, but neither of us had the slightest mood to appreciate the view. The atmosphere inside was so thick it felt like it could be wrung out by hand. Director True sat behind a massive rosewood desk, his expression icy and composed. He was 55, impeccably maintained. The fine lines at the corners of his eyes and the blade-sharp gaze revealed a man seasoned by decades of ruthless commerce. Beside him sat his chief legal advisor, a stern middle-aged woman with an unreadable expression. On the sofa opposite was a stranger, around 35 or 36, wearing a tailored suit and gold-rimmed glasses. He looked refined, but his eyes were sharp and probing. Director True, Tom Tran began, lowering his voice. Regarding this incident, I offer my sincerest apologies on behalf of our company. He briefly explained Li Na's betrayal and the internal actions taken. Director True merely gave a cold snort, lifting his teacup and gently blowing away the foam. Tom Tran, he said calmly, the business world isn't a stage play. I'm not interested in stories. I only care about results. His words weren't loud, but each one landed like a hammer against the chest. Tom Tran's face flushed deep red. He couldn't speak. I stepped forward and placed the thick report on Director True's desk. Director True, I know any apology is meaningless at this point, I said evenly. But this is our newly revised project evaluation report. I ask for just 15 minutes. Director True glanced at me once, then at the document. He said nothing, silent consent. I connected my laptop to the large display. I didn't evade the issue. I opened both reports side by side. This is the flawed report you received. And this is the original version our company prepared. We acknowledge a serious internal failure that led to this incident. But I'm not here today to beg for forgiveness. I'm here to present an opportunity worth tens of billions, one that was nearly buried by that distorted report. Even Director True looked momentarily stunned. I gave him no time to respond and went straight to the core. From macroeconomics to industry trends, from technological barriers to business models, I distilled the essence of the entire report into 15 minutes. I spoke quickly, but clearly and logically. Every number was precise, every forecast backed by rigorous analysis. I didn't rely on rhetoric. I used data, charts, and logic to paint a business landscape that was both expansive and grounded in reality. When I reached the risk assessment section, I deliberately slowed down. I introduced the stress testing module, simulating profit volatility under different decision-making scenarios. When the chart appeared, showing how reliance on an outdated model and the premature sell-off of the new energy project would result in the loss of hundreds of billions, I saw Director True's hand freeze midair. Teacup suspended. The man in glasses beside him went visibly tense. I finished and bowed deeply. That concludes my presentation. Thank you, Director True. The room fell into absolute silence. Sweat soaked Tom Tran's palms. Director True set his teacup down, fingers tapping slowly against the desk. After a long pause, he finally spoke. Young lady, what is your name? My name is Lam Khê. Lam Khê, he repeated, a hint of admiration surfacing. This report, it was done by you? Yes. At that moment, the man with glasses finally spoke. Ms. Lam Khê, your report is impressive, but forgive me, I have a few questions. Some of these projections seem optimistic. For example, you suggest a 5% market share increase within 3 years if our technologies are integrated. What data supports this? And have you considered the reaction of our largest competitor, Tin Technology? He had struck the most sensitive point. Tin was the #1 rival in this field. I met his gaze calmly. Your question is entirely valid, I said. And I've conducted a thorough analysis of Tin as well. I opened the appendix. The screen instantly filled with detailed data on Tin. Their current core technology is built on a platform imported from Europe 2 years ago. That platform has inherent limitations in data processing efficiency and energy consumption. Our Comms system, on the other hand, is entirely self-developed. In terms of performance, it's at least one full generation ahead. As for the 5% market share increase, that figure is actually conservative. My model accounts for every countermeasure Tin could deploy, from price wars to patent litigation. All of those variables have already been factored into the coefficients. My answer was airtight, beyond expectations. I caught a flicker of panic in the man's eyes. He hadn't expected me to understand Tin's home turf this deeply. Director True looked at him, then back at me, his gaze growing increasingly inscrutable. Then he suddenly laughed. All right, that's enough for today. He stood, walked over, and personally picked up the report. Tong Tran, I want a serious written explanation regarding your internal issues. As for cooperation, once you've cleaned house, we'll talk. Then he turned to me, his tone noticeably softer. Lam Khê, I'll read this report carefully. You're a very interesting young person. As we exited the building, Tong Tran let out a long breath, drenched in sweat. Lam Khê, you're practically a deity walking among mortals, he said. My heart nearly leapt out of my chest back there. But I wasn't nearly as optimistic. The final look in the man with glasses eyes, and Director True's words, kept echoing in my mind. Clean house. Li Na was only a pawn pushed into the light. The man with glasses, and the force behind him, Tin Technology, were the real puppet masters. There was likely still a traitor hiding within our company. As soon as we returned, Tong Tran convened an executive meeting and officially announced that I would temporarily replace Li Na, assuming full authority over all matters related to the True Project. He praised me lavishly, even announced an immediate promotion and salary increase, but I declined. Tong Tran, I said once we were alone. This isn't the time for rewards. I said coldly, the house still isn't clean. I laid out my suspicions to him, about the unusual behavior of the man in the suit who had appeared in Director True's office that day. His name was Trong Bak, Vice President of Market Operations at Tin Technology. I had seen his name before in industry reports. Why would he be present in Director True's office? And why did he understand our project so thoroughly, far beyond what an ordinary competitor should know? I suspected he was connected to Li Na. The core source code Li Na had leaked. Tin was very likely the final buyer. Tong Tran froze, sweat instantly breaking out across his forehead. You mean, there's still a Tin spy inside our company? It's not a possibility, I replied decisively. It's a certainty. Li Na alone couldn't have executed such a meticulous plan. Altering reports required technical access. Leaking core source code required authorization. There had to be someone behind her, someone inside the company with access to both the core technology and senior management systems. Tong Tran's face turned ashen. The fury of being betrayed by someone he trusted nearly drove him mad. Search. Tear the place apart if you have to. Drag him into the light. No, I stopped him immediately. They're already on high alert. If we investigate openly, he'll only hide deeper. Then what do we do? Leave it to me, I said, meeting his gaze. I need your authorization, full access to all internal data streams and a list of every key employee who's had contact with Li Na. Tong Tran nodded without hesitation. From that moment on, I became the company's shadow detective. By day, I continued refining the cooperation plan with Director True, coordinating closely with all departments. By night, When the office fell silent, I returned alone to the icy server room. Using my skills, I quietly wove a surveillance net across the entire internal network, monitoring every file transfer, every abnormal login, every suspicious communication. After several days, patterns began to emerge. I noticed that Technical Director Wang Gong, had been behaving strangely. He often stayed late after work and frequently made long phone calls to unfamiliar numbers from other provinces. I also remembered that after the incident at the banquet erupted, he was the first person to shift blame onto me. Later, when Li Na was exposed, his reaction had been excessive, overly shocked, overly furious, as if trying too hard to sever ties with her. Most importantly, he had the authority to access the core source code, and the ability to help Li Na quietly alter report data without anyone noticing. In my mind, the prime suspect was already clear. But suspicion wasn't enough. I needed irrefutable evidence. So I set a trap. I created an encrypted compressed file, disguising it as a technical supplement for Phase 2 of the Director True project. In reality, it contained deliberately fabricated code riddled with obvious flaws. I then, accidentally, uploaded it to the encrypted directory reserved exclusively for senior management, accessible only to a handful of people, including Wang Gong. I installed an alert mechanism. The moment anyone attempted to access, download, or modify the file, my phone would receive an immediate notification. When everything was ready, I clocked out as usual. All that remained was to wait for the fish to bite. That night, I barely slept. At around 2 a.m., my phone vibrated once. An encrypted alert appeared on the screen. Target file accessed and downloaded. Internal IP address. Login account, Wang Gong, Tech Director. I stared at the message, my eyes turning ice cold. The next morning, I silently placed the latest log records on Tong Tran's desk. As he read the data transfer entry, his hands trembled so violently he could barely hold his coffee cup. He couldn't believe it, the traitor was the person he had trusted most for over 10 years. Wang Gong, the chief engineer he had personally promoted and supported. The door to Tong Tran's office closed tightly. I didn't go in, I stood outside, waiting in silence. At first, there was Tong Tran's restrained interrogation. Then came Wang Gong's agitated denials. Tong Tran, you can't just listen to Lam Khê alone. She's abusing company matters to settle personal grudges. I've devoted 10 years to this company, maybe no great achievements, but plenty of hard work. How could I betray it? His voice grew louder, devolving into a heated argument. Then, silence. A few minutes later, the door opened. Tong Tran stepped out, his face pale, eyes heavy with exhaustion and disappointment. He nodded slightly at me. He confessed. I followed him inside. Wang Gong was slumped on the sofa like an empty shell, eyes vacant, completely broken. Faced with the undeniable evidence I had gathered, every excuse he made collapsed into meaninglessness. In the end, he suffered a complete psychological breakdown and confessed everything. A year earlier, Trong Bak, vice president of market operations at Vien Tin, had approached him through a headhunting firm. Trong Bak promised him the position of chief technology officer at Vien Tin, along with a massive equity package. The condition: become an internal mole, leak core source code, sabotage key partnerships at critical moments. Greed and resentment toward his stagnant position drove Wang Gong to betray the company. Li Na was merely a pawn under his control. He exploited her jealousy and ignorance, promising that once the mission was complete, she would replace me and become project director. The entire scheme was scripted by Wang Gong and Trong Bak. They engineered the incident at the banquet, altered the data to destroy Director True's trust. Then Trong Bak would appear as the savior, proposing Vien Tin as a replacement partner. At the same time, amid the chaos, Wang Gong would steal the Thien Kong project's source code. One arrow, three birds. And I, Lam Khê, was the pre-arranged scapegoat. My unexpected absence that night shattered their entire plan. Had I been there, facing the falsified report and Director True's fury, I would have been deemed responsible and fired on the spot. At that point, Wang Gong and Li Na's plan would have been flawless, without a trace. After hearing the full confession, Tong Tran trembled with rage. He pointed at Wang Gong, unable to speak for a long time, before finally letting out a long, hoarse sigh. He immediately ordered the legal department to report the case to the police and submit all confessions and evidence I had collected to the authorities. At last, the truth came to light. Tong Tran personally called Director True and recounted everything, from beginning to end, without hiding a single detail. On the other end of the line, Director True was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "Tong Tran, you have an exceptional employee. Please convey my thanks to Lam Khê. She didn't just save your company, she saved me from a catastrophic loss. As for the partnership, bring her tomorrow, we'll sign again." Tong Tran couldn't hide his emotion. He looked at me with eyes full of gratitude and relief. I seized the moment to make my next proposal. "Tong Tran, this incident also exposed serious flaws in Director True's own risk assessment system. Vien Tin's people infiltrated even his office without detection. I propose that in the new cooperation contract, we add an expanded clause. We'll independently develop a comprehensive intelligent risk assessment system specifically for Director True. This demonstrates both our capability and goodwill, and transforms a single collaboration into a deep strategic alliance." Tong Tran's eyes lit up. "Excellent, absolutely excellent. Lam Khê, you're a genius of this company." Internally, the collapse of Wang Gong and Li Na, and the exposure of the truth, sent shockwaves through the company. Those who had once mocked or isolated me now looked at me with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Whispered conversations followed me everywhere. "She's dangerous, not someone to mess with. She flipped the entire company by herself." I didn't care. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling window in Tong Tran's office, gazing down at the endless stream of traffic below. Once, I had been just another nameless figure in the crowd. Now, using nothing but expertise and intellect, I had overturned the board. A satisfaction I had never felt before surged through me. And I knew, this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of reclaiming everything that belonged to me. The next day, Tong Tran convened an all-hands meeting. The conference hall was packed, the atmosphere suffocatingly serious. For the first time, Tong Tran stood before the entire company and publicly disclosed the full truth behind the data breach incident. He didn't dodge management failures. He didn't excuse his misjudgment of people. At last, his gaze landed on me in the front row. "Today, I want to give special thanks to one person. When the company stood on the edge of an abyss, she used extraordinary professional ability and intelligence to reverse the situation. She not only exposed the internal conspiracy, but also helped us reclaim our most important partner. That person is Lam Khê." Every eye in the room turned toward me. Thunderous applause erupted. Within it were genuine admiration, relief at surviving disaster, and also unmistakable embarrassment and shame. Tong Tran declared loudly, "According to the decision of the Board of Directors, effective immediately, I was formally appointed as Director of Strategic Projects, with full authority over the Thien Kong project and all collaborations with Director True, reporting directly to Tong Tran. At the same time, the company granted me 5% ESOP equity." That single sentence was enough to detonate the entire hall. It meant I was no longer an ordinary employee. I had become a partner of the company, someone with a real voice in shaping its future. I stood up and gave a slight bow to everyone. My expression was calm, restrained, betraying no excessive emotion. Because I deserved all of it. Li Na and Wang Kong were formally indicted on charges of commercial espionage and abuse of authority for illegal financial gain. Awaiting them were severe legal judgments and long, desolate years behind bars. As for the puppet master behind Veen Tin Technology, due to the impact of this scandal, their stock price collapsed in freefall. Their reputation sank to rock bottom, turning them into a laughingstock across the entire industry. After the meeting, a long line formed outside my office. People who had once been cold to me, who had even joined in trampling me, now smiled obsequiously, gifts in hand, desperately trying to curry favor. Tong Ki, congratulations, you're truly incredible. Director Lam, I hope you'll guide us more in the future. I looked at them indifferently and gestured to my newly appointed assistant. Sorry, Tong Ki is very busy right now and not receiving visitors. I began building my own team. My first decision: everyone from my old group who had participated in isolating me, or who had turned a blind eye to Li Na's actions, was removed from key positions. I didn't need a pack of people who followed whichever way the wind blew. I needed people with real ability, integrity, and the courage to fight alongside me. I personally selected talent from the technical department, the business division, even overlooked minor positions. I recruited young people with skill and intelligence, those who had been buried and ignored. My team took shape rapidly. The new cooperation contract with Director True was officially signed. Its value doubled. And Director True himself personally designated me, Lam Ki, as the sole person in charge and senior technical advisor for the entire project. After the signing ceremony, he invited me to speak privately. He said that the more he understood who I truly was, the more confidence he had in me. He then invited me to serve as his personal investment advisor, participating in other future projects. That evening, Tong Tran hosted a small celebration in my honor at the company. He raised his glass and walked up to me, his eyes carrying sincere remorse. Lam Ki, honestly speaking, I owe you an apology. I was too indifferent before and allowed you to suffer unnecessary injustice. From now on, in this company, I will support every decision you make, unconditionally. I raised my glass and gently clinked it against his. Tong Tran, let the past stay in the past. From here on, let's look forward. I drained the glass of red wine in one go. The burning liquid slid down my throat, carrying with it every humiliation and bitterness of the past years, now transformed into glory and strength. I was standing at the center of power. But I knew this power was not granted to me by anyone. I seized it with my own hands, step by step, breaking through encirclements and climbing upward. I had proven my worth. I had changed the company's fate. And now, I would use that power to build a new order, one that belonged to me. The cases against Li Na and Vong Kong were swiftly brought to trial. Both were sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to compensate the company for all economic losses they had caused. That meant that beyond prison, once released, they would still bear enormous debt, ruined reputations. No way back. As a key witness, I attended the trial. Standing at the witness stand, I calmly presented the entire truth. When the police escorted Li Na out of the courtroom, she glared at me, her eyes filled with venom and hatred, as if she wanted to tear me apart on the spot. But my heart didn't stir. I didn't look at her. I only lifted my gaze to the solemn national emblem hanging on the wall. This was not personal vengeance. This was the defense of principles and justice. You reap what you sow. Back at the company, I initiated a deeper internal purge. I compiled a list of those who had actively participated in isolating me, those who had mocked and humiliated me most viciously. I wrote a detailed report, documenting their actions, words, and the negative impact they had caused, and sent it directly to Human Resources. In the end, those individuals were disciplined under the grounds of misalignment with corporate culture and lack of collaborative competence. Some were transferred away from critical positions. Some were terminated outright. Among them was Trong Yen, the female colleague who had once been Li Na's most loyal right-hand woman, and also the one who had taken the greatest pleasure in mocking me. After being fired, she waited for me secretly in the underground parking garage, blocking my car and breaking down in tears. Begging. Tong Ki, I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. I was misled by Li Na. I was blinded. Please give me one more chance. I still have rent to pay. I can't lose my job. I rolled down the window and looked at her coldly. Trong Yen. First, everyone must take responsibility for their own actions. The company has its rules. I can't interfere. Second, I paused, looking straight into her pale face, devoid of real remorse. I accept your apology, but forgiveness is God's business. As for me, I only guarantee one thing. There will never be someone like you on my team. I rolled the window up and stepped on the gas, leaving her sobbing behind me. I am not a saint. And I don't run a charity. Those who hurt me, I was already being merciful by not seeking revenge. Asking me to repay evil with kindness? Sorry, I'm not that noble. After that, I began pushing forward a deep internal reform. Working with HR and the technical department, I built a new evaluation and promotion system, entirely based on ability and actual contribution. Every metric was digitized, open, and transparent. The possibility of climbing through connections or flattery was completely eliminated. Under my leadership, the core theme Kong project, handled by my new team, advanced at astonishing speed. We completed the first phase 3 months ahead of schedule, with all performance metrics far exceeding contractual expectations. The project delivered the highest quarterly revenue in the company's history. The name Lam Ki, along with my team, became a legend within the company. All grudges, all entanglements, all closed. The traitors were punished. Those who once suppressed me were purged. I consolidated power through real capability, while simultaneously creating a fairer arena for those with true talent, who had once been buried just like me. I stood atop a new order that I had built with my own hands, my heart completely at peace. And I did not become the kind of person I once despised. I was simply taking back what had always belonged to me. After the resounding success of the collaboration project with Director True, the name Lam Ki spread rapidly throughout the entire industry. I was no longer just Director Lam of some company. I had become one of the recognized top experts in data analysis and crisis management. I was invited to attend the industry's year-end executive summit. This time, I was no longer sitting beneath the stage, looking up at someone else bathed in light. I was the keynote speaker, the final special guest to step onto the stage. Under the anticipation and focused attention of hundreds of people, I shared my experience handling the recent crisis, along with my personal insights into the future development trends of the industry. There were no hollow slogans in my speech, only real situations and lessons paid for in blood and sweat. Below the stage sat rows of executives from major corporations and veteran technical elites. Every one of them listened intently. When the talk ended, I was immediately surrounded by a dense crowd. Business cards piled into my hands. Headhunting firms swarmed in, competing fiercely to recruit me. The salaries they offered ranged from several million to tens of millions of yuan per year. Some even directly proposed a position as regional vice president for Greater China. Tong Tran walked beside me, tense like a mother hen guarding her eggs, afraid I'd be snatched away on the spot. On the way back, he solemnly took a folder out of his briefcase. Lam Ki, this is the latest decision from the board of directors. We've decided to grant you an additional 10% ESOP equity, officially making you the company's second largest individual shareholder. I know many companies out there are trying to lure you away. I can't offer you a salary as high as theirs, but what I can give you is the future of this company. Lam Ki, stay with me and let's turn this place into our kingdom. I looked into his sincere eyes and smiled softly. I declined all offers from the headhunters. Money and titles were no longer the most important things to me. What I truly longed for was to personally build a fair, transparent, and vibrant working environment, a place where every talented individual would be respected and rewarded accordingly. A place where there would never again be another Lâm Khê forced to endure what I once did. I launched an internal talent development program called Project Morningstar. I personally served as mentor, holding nothing back, passing on all my experience and knowledge to promising young people. I was no longer the marginalized outsider. I became an ideal role model in the industry, a guiding lighthouse for countless young engineers searching for their future. Every action I took, every word I spoke, drew attention from across the entire field. Sometimes, late at night in the quiet hours, my mind drifted back to that banquet years ago, the night I was completely forgotten. I remembered the feeling of isolation, of humiliation so cold it cut to the bone. But now, that feeling was no longer pain. It had become gratitude. Gratitude for that dark night, which acted like a surgeon's scalpel, cutting open every toxic illusion in my life, allowing me to see the malice of human nature clearly, and awakening the full potential that had been sleeping inside me. Without that night, there would be no brilliance of today. I know my story has only just begun. The road ahead is long, but I am ready. Ready to walk forward into a future entirely under my own control. 3 years later, under my leadership, the company that once stood on the brink of bankruptcy had become the brightest rising star in the tech industry. Its market value increased 20-fold. The Thien Kong system we developed became the technical standard for the entire industry. The core project division one personally built and led earned the title of the Golden Team of Tech. Every member of my team showed me absolute respect and unconditional loyalty, because they understood that working with me meant not only achieving technological ideals, but also receiving compensation far beyond industry norms. I turned my journey into a book titled Victory from an Absence. In it, I detailed the pivotal turning points of my workplace comeback and how I handled crises from my most personal perspective. Upon release, the book became a phenomenon, ranking among the year's bestsellers and inspiring countless young professionals struggling in the corporate world. I became someone many people aspired to be. Once, I came across news about the aftermath of Li Na and Vong Kong. After serving their sentences, burdened with criminal records and crushing debt, no company would hire them. Their lives were poor and miserable. It was said that while still in prison, Li Na learned of my achievements and suffered multiple mental breakdowns. Meanwhile, Director True became my closest and most trusted partner. Together, we invested in a series of high-potential projects, each one achieving outstanding success. Now, the name Lâm Khê had become a symbol of credibility in the business world. I was no longer someone who had to look up to others, who lived by reading a boss's or colleague's mood. I had become someone who held fate in her own hands, someone capable of influencing the direction of an entire industry. My life, because of that, had become fuller and more brilliant than ever before. I obtained things I once never dared to dream of: wealth, admiration, power. But what satisfied me the most was a single feeling: control. The ability to realize my own value. On a sunny afternoon, as usual, I stood in the rooftop garden on the company's highest floor, holding a cup of coffee and looking down at the bustling city below. People flowed like ants, rushing through life. Suddenly, my thoughts returned to that morning many years ago, the image of over 100 missed calls lighting up my phone. The suffocating fear gripping my heart, mixed with a cold, fragile thread of hope. Thinking back now, there was no pain, only quiet gratitude. That absence back then looked like humiliation, like a passive escape. But in truth, it was a choice. An opportunity fate handed to me. Because of it, I learned who was friend and who was foe. Because of it, I shed my soft, false shell and revealed my sharp claws. Because of it, I stand where I am today. I smiled and finished the last sip of coffee. I knew this was my true victory. A victory that began with that single absence. The victory belonged entirely to me. Looking back, I learned this. Don't fear being left out. Sometimes it's the greatest chance to see yourself and others clearly. Silence, used at the right moment, is a powerful weapon. Don't let emotions rule you when you're humiliated. The truly capable are irreplaceable. Forgiveness is a choice, don't force yourself to be noble. True power is changing the rules of the game. Never underestimate the persistence of someone who has been hurt. Success turns scars into badges of honor. And the most reliable person is yourself. The greatest storm turned out to be the doorway to the strongest version of me. If you're at rock bottom, believe this. As long as you haven't let go, it's only the starting point for a higher leap. That's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, subscribe to China Story Tales, and stay tuned for more stories.